Shalom and good morning from Israel. We will be continuing today with the study of prayer from the prayer booklet for Noachites. And today we are going to look at the structure of prayer, and we'll go through the blessings that a person is required to say in the morning, and we'll try to give some insights on it. As usual, you are welcome during the class to post your questions on the right side of the screen, and I'll try to address them during the class or at the end of the class. So we are holding at page 12 of the prayer booklet, and we're going to look into the prayer per se. But before that, I would like to give an insight on the general structure of prayer. Prayer is a movement of the soul from below to on high. It's a movement of the person to a general awareness of God. Generally, we are put in a situation that we receive from on high to below, meaning that our state of consciousness in our daily life is that of receiving divine inspiration from on high, whether it is through the study, whether it is through our interaction with the details of the world. The movement of prayer is the opposite movement. It's from lemata lemal, it's from below to on high. So that ascension goes through four levels, which correspond to the four worlds, and which is expressed in the four parts of the prayer. The first part is what corresponds to the blessings of the morning, as we're going to see it today. And it corresponds to the world of Asiyah, what we call the world of action. Is when a person is engaged with his individual consciousness. That is the first part of prayer. And it goes on page 12 until middle of page 13, until the end of the blessings that we say in the morning. The second part is Psukei de Zimra, is the Psalms of Praise, which corresponds to the second world, to the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, which is the world of emotions, the world of Ruach, what we call the world of spirit, which is the world where we can start feeling our beginning of unification of our emotions with those of God. That is the second part of prayer. The third part of prayer in the ascension path is on page 17, on the middle of page 17, and it corresponds to the accepting of God's unity and kingship over us. And that corresponds to the Olam HaBriya, the world of creation. That is the level where a person can start becoming creative. How so? Because at this point in prayer, a person has attained already a sufficient level of nullification of self, of nullification of one's ego, in order to receive already a high level of divine consciousness and to ignite within him his creative capacity, which is an ability that human beings have due to the fact that they are created in the image of God. That's the third level in prayer. The fourth level of prayer is to be found on page 18 of the book, and it corresponds to the devout prayer, what we call in Hebrew the Amidah, the standing prayer, where a person reaches the highest level of nullification to God's consciousness, and he does this prayer silently, expressing that level of nullification. This level of prayer corresponds to what we call the Olam HaAtzilut, the world of emanation. This world is a world where there is no a concrete boundary between the creature and the creator. The word of emanation, we say in Hebrew, atzilut, comes from the etymology of etzlo, meaning by him, meaning it's like being by him with no separation yet. There is no yet separation of creator and creature. It's like being invited at someone's house. When one is lying in the presence of the person that invited us, we are by him. We are, in Hebrew, etzlo. There is no walls separating the person and his host. So it's considered as being etzlo, by him. That is the highest level and the fourth level of nullification of oneself. And that's the highest level in prayer that one can become connected to God. Those are the four levels of prayer that ascend, that allows a human being to ascend to four different worlds, four different stages of consciousness of the divine. So we are going now to look at the first world, at the first part of prayer, which corresponds to the prayers and blessings that we say in the morning, and it starts on page 12. For those who have the booklet, you can look with me on page 12. We're going to go through the text and through the blessings. They are very beautiful and very important. Upon awakening, a person should consider in whose presence he lies. He should be mindful of the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. As it says in Isaiah 6:3, the whole world is filled with His glory. Meaning that immediately when a person wakes up, he goes from a state of individual perception of oneself, of individual consciousness, to a general state of consciousness. He tries to nullify that fake feeling of self that starts from the moment that the body wakes up, meaning that the soul starts functioning, making the body function, so the body acquires immediately a lot of space. It takes a lot of space, and all of its impulsions become something that is very, it takes a lot of importance in our consciousness. So we try to immediately upon awaking to realize that the world is filled with the glory of God, meaning that we can achieve that state of general consciousness and not to be stuck with our own ego selves. So, as we mentioned before, after one says this short prayer, the world is filled with His glory, he will then have a shower, dress himself, eat something, and then choose a place where it's calm, that he can start praying for at least 5 minutes, 10 minutes, in order to be successful during his daily activities. And fulfilling, of course, its mission in doing a dwelling place for God down here, and that's starting with one's own consciousness. So after preparing oneself for prayer, one should recite, I offer thanks to you, living and eternal King, for you have mercifully restored my soul within me. Your faithfulness is great. And then we'll recite Adon Olam, Lord of the universe, who reigned before anything was created, at the time when His will brought all things into being. Then was His name proclaimed King. It's referring to the times before the first sin. And after all things will be uplifted, the awesome one will reign alone. He was, He is, and He shall be in glory. He is one, and there is no other to compare to Him, to call His equal. Without beginning, without end, power and dominion belong to Him. He is my God and my ever-living Redeemer, the strength of my lot in the time of distress. He is my banner and my refuge, my portion on the day I call. Into His hand I entrust my spirit when I sleep and when I awake. And with my soul, my body too, the Lord is with me, I shall not fear. So this is the first part where we actually bring within ourselves, within our consciousness, this general awareness of being one with God, and that our individual existence is not a contradiction to the infinite light of God that fills the worlds, and it should fill ourselves. That's the main part of making a dwelling place for God down in the world. It's to connect our consciousness to the divine consciousness which pervades all creation. So now we'll go to page 13 and we'll recite the morning blessings that one is required to say. So we'll say the first blessing. Blessed is he who spoke and the universe came into being. Blessed is he. Blessed is he who says and does. Blessed is he who decrees and fulfills. Blessed is he who creates all that exists. Blessed is he who has compassion on the earth. Blessed is he who has compassion on the created beings. Blessed is he who provides good reward to those who fear him. Blessed is he who lives forever and exists eternally. Blessed is he who redeems and saves. Blessed is his name. So these are the blessings that a person is required to say in the morning to connect himself to that state of consciousness that God is the provider of all. Then the prayer continues with the second part, as we mentioned before, with the Psalms of Praise that we'll learn in the next class. So now let's try to understand a little bit further what is mentioned in the blessings. We're going to take the first blessing. As we mentioned before, we have to try to achieve some state of awareness, some mindfulness when we are about to say those words in order to really bring in that state of consciousness. So the first blessing, blessed is he who spoke and the universe came into being, blessed is he. So the first teaching is that what brings creation into existence is God's speech. So we can use this knowledge in order to understand two main things in our Avodas Hashem, in our service of God, which are, first thing, that the entire creation is the expression of God's speech. And speech is it's a creation in order to communicate between two people, between two entities, between the creator and the creature. So if one is able to develop his sensitivity, his spiritual awareness, he's able eventually to hear actually God speaking within creation to him. In those days before the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, before at the year 2448 of creation, when the Torah was given, before that, in the times of Adam, of Noach, of Avraham, they will also study Torah, but in a different way. Human beings were able to learn God's instructions through observing nature, in a sense that they were spiritually sensitive to such a degree that they were able to hear God speaking to them in a much more clear way, because they were in a higher level of spiritual awareness. The highest level of spiritual awareness was, of course, of that of Adam, the first human being, which includes all human beings, Jews and Noachites alike. And his state of awareness of God's speech was so high that he was able to see the divine words, the divine letters that invest themselves into a vessel in order to become an animal. He was able to see, for example, the name of a horse, Sus. He saw the letters. That's why God asked Adam to name the animals, because Adam was in such a high level of sensitivity that he was able to perceive divine speech in a revealed manner. So he was able to name the elements within creation. That's what we sometimes lack nowadays. We lack the appropriate words to express ourselves. We lack the appropriate capabilities of naming things, whether it is emotionally or whether it is in the nature around us. Let's take the example of a person living in Europe and a person living in Greenland. A person living in Europe may see once a year the snow. So for him, snow, it's snow. There is only one type of snow. But for a person who's living in Greenland, that there is snow almost, or if not the entire year, he is used to live in the middle of the snow. So he is able to define 10 different levels of snow. If the snow is soft, if the snow is harsh, if it's frozen, if it's powderous, he has many nuances into that existence of snow. Whether a person that lives in Europe that only sees snows once a year will only see one level of snow. He will not be able to name those different nuances within that element of snow. Therefore, he will also only be able to relate to one certain level of reality, to that level of reality that he knows, that he is able to name. In contrast with the person that living in Greenland, who is able to relate and experience 10 different nuances of snow, because he learned how to recognize those different states of expression of snow. That is the first lesson that one has to take within, that one has to study Torah in order to become sensitive to the different levels of reality and to be able to perceive how the light of God invests itself and expresses itself within the world, within our daily lives, within our daily going into the bus, getting into our office, or relating to people, or relating to our family. We have to become sensitive, spiritually sensitive human beings that are able to hear God speaking to us in a constant manner. That is what creation is all about. It's God speaking. And to speak, one has to activate one's emotions. As we spoke before, the 7 commandments parallel the 7 emotions. And it's only through the precise fulfillment of the 7 commandments that one can really ignite in its fullest every one of the 7 powers of the soul, from loving kindness until humility or kingship. That is the first lesson that a person has to take within himself when he's saying this blessing. That's the state of mindfulness that you should have. The second conclusion that we have to take from the first verse that we say in the morning, the first blessing, for blessed is he who spoke and the universe came into being, blessed is he, is the power of speech. We mentioned this before. It's the 2nd commandment, to honor God through speech, to respect him. And this includes especially prayer, because prayer is an act where the humanity within a person becomes one with divinity through speech. By one gluing his speech to the divine speech, which is written in the book, he is able to fuse his consciousness with the divine consciousness. And therefore, the same power that God uses in order to bring creation into being, a human being will be able then to use the koach hadibur, the power of speech, in order to create reality, in order to design the atmosphere in which he lives. The experience of reality depends on the quality of the wording that we have, on the quality of the words that we use. We have to try to often use positive words, emphasize the positive, and not talk so much about the negative. We can see the negative, but let it go through. Don't pay so much attention. Let's not so be critical regarding others, always looking for their faults, always looking to repair others. But one should have his mind focused in the good that is expressed outside, in emphasizing the good. And one can reserve his criticism to oneself. Did I do exactly, or did I do everything that I could today? Did I give the best of me today? That's really where the critic should be addressed to oneself and not to others. Let's inverse that flux of interaction about powering to others, to the exterior, our criticism, and being so encouraging with oneself, in the sense that, you know, when a person goes to bed in the night and he sleeps like a baby, he doesn't think about how much he could be even better. He could do more in his daily life and be more present with his family, and be more present with others, and listen to others, and doing more goodness and kindness around him. That is the true essence of a human being. So let's try to readjust the flux and the human experience in that sense. So through the power of speech, a person can go from a state of exile to a state of redemption. If a person speaks about negativity, one is in exile, in self-exile and exiling others, because it's disconnecting from the source of goodness, which is God. So a person has to try to infuse his own atmosphere and the atmosphere of those that surrounding him through words of Torah, through words of wisdom, through words of sincerity, of humility, of caring, of wanting to bring out the good which is within every person, which in every situation. That is the process of redemption, is through speech, is through the capability of a person to modulate his own experience. That is the way to go from a state of exile through a state of redemption. And prayer allows us to fulfill that. Of course, it will be a challenge to maintain that state of awareness and of consciousness during the day. But with practice, with exercise, a person can bring himself more and more frequently to that state of consciousness until he finally gets to a permanent state of redemption. The following blessing continues to express the same idea, which is, blessed is he who says and does. So this connects further the speech to action. When the speech is really connected to the higher thought, to God's thought, which is expressed in Torah, so the level of coherence, the level of doing what one says becomes maximized. And that's what really, if you look into your own children around you, your children look often to you as parents to see if you're coherent, if you actually do what you say. They are looking for the truth. And this is where truth is revealed, when a person actually does what he says he does. And there's many people with good intentions that say things, and for one reason or another, they cannot keep their promises, and they cannot bring them into action for different reasons that we're not going to discuss right now. But that's why in the second commandment of honoring God, one has to be careful in not to take upon oneself vows. We mentioned before that one should not take vows because he's then engaged through his own word. One should say, you know, to one's children, I will take you to the zoo, bli neder, without a vow. God willing, God give me the strength and allows me to fulfill what I'm saying. But B'ezrat Hashem, that's what I want now, and God willing, we will be able to do it. And of course, one should make efforts. It's not to put things on the back of on God's shoulders. One should take upon himself that responsibility and do what he says. The ultimate coherence, the ultimate expression of this is, of course, God. That his speech and the action is one and the same. He is speaking and the world is coming into being. So it's one and the same. By us, human beings, there is a certain delay. Therefore, when we say something, not necessarily it becomes materially revealed immediately. But we should definitely go towards that movement of doing what we say. So the third blessing continues to express the same idea. Blessed is he who decrees and fulfills. It's the same idea. The fourth blessing expresses further on the same idea. Blessed is he who creates all that exists, meaning that there is no place for any entity other than God. There is no intermediary here activating creation. There was a discussion amongst the sages about the creation of the world. And if God created the world and the laws of physics that maintain the characteristics of the world as they are, and that's it, he creates the laws and the laws maintain the world as it is, or is God involved not only in the laws but in every detail of creation? So the first group of sages maintain that God created the laws of physics, of the gravitational force, electromagnetic forces, strong links, weak links, and those forces, they maintain creation as we know it. They maintain it in that way. So God just took a step back and left the world being conducted through the laws of nature. That is the philosophical misinterpretation that a lot of philosophers did during the ages. They believe in God, but they think that God just went on vacation. He left humanity on its own, and now it's to us to do everything on ourselves. The second group of sages says that God does not only create the world and the laws of physics that maintain the world. According to the Rambam, that expresses that opinion in law, God is invested within every single detail of creation. There is a divine providence in every single detail of creation, from the biggest whale to the smallest mosquito, or to the movement of an atom of oxygen. There is divine providence ruling every single detail of creation. Nothing is left by chance. According to the first opinion, there would be a general providence of species of fish, of species of trees. There would be a general providence, like a person could watch over a class of students, a general providence. But no, God is watching every single detail of creation. God is watching every single one of us in a precise and individual level. That is how much we should be aware of God in a detailed way. In every single detail of our lives, we should know that we are lying in the presence of God. We are standing in the presence of God. So further on, the blessing following, blessed is he who has compassion on earth, meaning that God does not judge the world only with strict justice, but he is patient, like a loving father. He knows that we are human beings and that sometimes we do mistakes, so he accepts tshuva, he accepts our asking for forgiveness, and he's ready to accept us back into his presence. The following blessing, blessed is he who provides good reward to those who fear him. And this is a very important principle, that reward is a real thing, that by a person keeping to his commandments and doing God's will, a person will see his reward, will have a fulfilled life, fulfilled relationships with his spouse, with his children, with his friends. And he also will have his reward, the ultimate reward, in the world to come, in the resurrection of the dead, when the soul will be incorporated or reincarnated into a eternal body, where we will see no more disease, no more aging, and no more death. We will live forever, because there will be no more reason to stop creation or to stop a life, chas v'shalom, from our point of view. From God's point of view, it's already eternal. The name Avaya, as we mentioned in Hebrew, is the name that incorporates the three levels of time. Haya, Hoveh, V'Hiyeh. He was, he is, and he will be. That's the characteristic of truth, of God, which is eternal. It doesn't change. It was always there, and we will always be. The only question is about ourselves. Do we want to inscribe ourselves in that level of eternity, or we want to be temporal? So if we want to connect to eternity, we have to observe the commandments of God. The following blessing: blessed is he who lives forever and exists eternally. That is the blessing that we just explained. And the last blessing is, blessed is he who redeems and saves. Blessed is his name. So as mentioned before, God does redeem a human being. When a human being allows himself to be redeemed, when a human being starts his morning by thanking God, by recognizing the source of life, by reconnecting his consciousness to its source, he is becoming a vessel for redemption. Not only he will be redeemed, but also those who are around him, his family will be redeemed. He will infuse his relationships with godliness, with goodness, with a continuum of eternity. Things that not to be constantly compartmentalized, separated from each other. We do not have to constantly live in a state of protecting oneself from others to see what's really inside. If from the morning we really open ourselves to God, we revealed our inside, so we will not have to, during the rest of the day, to be afraid of people seeing our inside that is not connected. That is the root of fear that everybody has by diminishing his level of expression with his family, with his friends, because he wants to protect himself from something that is not there. It's just the opposite. When one reveals himself to God from the morning, when he entrusts himself and his life, and he knows that from God he is receiving everything, so he's not afraid of losing something. When he's in relationship with others, he's not afraid of losing that little quantity of meaning that he found himself to give a justification to his life. As many people do, we try to find little justifications to have another plan, another project for tomorrow, for next week, in order to keep us living, in order to give us a reason for living. So often we do not allow relationships with others to be in a harmonious level because we are afraid that the person can show us otherwise. And then we will lose our justification for living. And we don't want that because we are afraid of losing our self-existence, our self-ego, with what we built, the reason for our life. So from the morning when we entrust ourselves to God, when we know that He is the provider of all, and He is the one that defines the purpose of existence and the purpose of our life, then we will not be afraid anymore. We are able to entrust our life and all parts of our life to God, and we will not be afraid anymore. We will know that our purpose is the same purpose that God, to reveal goodness and kindness within the world. And for that, one has to become a vessel for redemption in the world, through one's consciousness, through one's speech, and through one's deeds. So this concludes the insights on the first part of prayer, the morning blessings, which correspond, as we mentioned before, to the first world or first level of consciousness that we call the world of action, when a human being has to do a little effort in order to accomplish it. You will see that further on the stages of prayer, we are already more taken by the divine hand, by the divine consciousness in itself, and the main effort in prayer needs to be done at this stage of prayer immediately upon one's awakening. So I will check here if there is any questions. I say good morning to everybody that came to the class. Happy to see you all as usual. Okieri from Ghana is here. Krishna from Florida. Martha. Annette, good morning. Al, also good morning. Let me see if there is a question here. Okay. Alana asks, do we need to learn the prayers in Hebrew? So the answer is no, you do not need to learn the prayers in Hebrew. Of course, God accepts the prayers in any language. Definitely you should say them in English or in French or in Spanish or in any other language or in Dutch. God accepts a prayer in any language. It's not limited by Hebrew. There is no point in saying the prayers in Hebrew. Nevertheless, if one learns Hebrew and he knows the full sense of the words of the prayer in Hebrew, he can also say the prayers in Hebrew if he really understands the meaning of every word. So to fulfill that act of prayer, the act of prayer is not only saying words, it's unifying levels of consciousness with the oneness of God. So the intention is one of the primary factors of prayer. So one has to understand the meaning, has to come through the first level is understanding. It's through the fulfillment of the meaning of what we are saying. We can unify that part within ourselves with God. Okay? So I hope that answers the question, Alana. Okay, another question here from Annette. Do we pray the prayer on page 18 silently? Yes, the answer is yes. For the devout prayer, you say the Amidah, the standing prayer, silently, but nevertheless audibly, meaning that you have to say the prayer in a way says, "Blessed are you, our God, Lord, King of the universe." Like saying in a tone that will not interfere with the person that will be standing next to you, half of a meter, that will perturbate him in his concentration, but it has to be in a tone that you yourself can hear yourself. Okay, so it's not in silent prayer, not silently, not complete silence. It has to be an undertone. Okay, so you can hear yourself. Okay, so that's for the question of Annette. Al has also a question. Is ordinary cap allowed to be wear in the absence of kippah during praying? And the answer is yes. You can definitely use a cap during prayer, and it is a good thing. It's a chassidische minhag. I'm sorry. It is a good trait to develop in oneself of a chassidu umot haolam, of a pious of the nations of the world, to cover one's head when one is praying. On the contrary of others, that when they are entering into a place of prayer, they take off their hats. On the contrary, we put the hats on our head, we cover our heads in sign of recognition, of reminder of what is above us, God Almighty, the King of Kings. So you can definitely use a cap during prayer. It's even better than a kippah because it covers the entire head. So if you have a kippah, you can also put the cap on the kippah. Yeah, I have the hat and the kippah under my hat, and two coverings is better than one, but again, you're not required stricto sensu according to the letter of the law, but it's definitely a good and a pious behavior. Okay, with pleasure. Okay. Okay, so I see there are no more questions. So I will, Shalom Maya. Before we leave the class, I want just to remind everybody that the registrations for the 3rd International Noahide Conference here in Jerusalem already started. People already started registering. The conference will take place, as you know, from the 24th to the 28th of June. It takes place during a full week from Sunday to Thursday. And you can see the program in general of the days on the Noahide Academy. I will post a link here on the bottom of the class's video. So you can see the details of what we are going to do during those 5 days. And we are looking forward to see you all here in Jerusalem for the 3rd time. For those that will come for the first time, I think it's going to be an unforgettable trip, an experience, and becoming an active part of redemption, an active part of the messianic process of redeeming humanity, of bringing the human experience to its new form, to its fulfillment, when all flesh will see godliness from one's own body. So we will, Bezat Hashem, be able to, as we say in Hebrew, fabreng, in Yiddish, fabreng, to celebrate in the temple with all the tzaddikim, and everybody will be invited in the temple to celebrate celebrations that we have only fathomed how great they are. So Bezat Hashem, we should all live inspired and stay connected to that goal and doing acts of goodness and kindness. That's the deed is the main thing. And as we mentioned in the last class, a little coin before prayer, it's establishing the deed of that connection within God and establishing justice within the world. And then we can really elevate ourselves to have higher levels of understanding, of connection with the divine. So I wish you all a great day, and Bezat Hashem, we shall meet soon. For those that are coming to Jerusalem, we will meet here in Jerusalem, God willing. And for the next class, we will continue on Sunday, Bezat Hashem. We'll continue with the subject of prayer. We'll go to the second stage of prayer, which corresponds to the second world, the world of Yetzirah, the world or the level in the personality of emotions. So have a great day and stay connected.